Podcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and good afternoon. For this month's New York City SharePoint user group, we're going to try something a little different with today's live webinar, Office 365 Use Cases, PowerApps, Flow, and Nintex Comparison, which will be presented by Terry Simpson, Technical Evangelist at Nintex. With 10 years of experience on the SharePoint implementation side, Terry enjoys sharing his expertise with the SharePoint community. My name is Danny Smith, and I am the Manager of Events and Marketing at Microexcel, and I will be moderating today's webinar. We just wanted to say a huge thank you to Terry for being here with us to present, and to Nintex for sponsoring this month's user group. This online session will focus on use cases for Office 365 automation with Nintex, Flow, and PowerApps. When designing and configuring solutions in SharePoint, the question frequently comes up around what tool to use for different situations. During this webinar, we will have an open discussion around Nintex, Flow, and PowerApps, and we'll compare and contrast each of the tools. Before we get started, there are just a few items we'd like to share with you. First, we wanted to say thank you for the understanding as we try this new method for the user group and search for a new venue to host future in-person user groups as we have been doing. Check back to the Meetup site as all future events will be listed there, and we will provide updates as well. Secondly, today's presentation is being recorded, and you will each receive a copy within a few days. Third, as we do want to encourage open discussion during our user group meetings, please feel free to ask any questions you may have as the presentation goes on in the questions box. I will then relay the questions to Terry for answers. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Terry Simpson for today's presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Danny, and thank you for the invitation to present to the user group today. I appreciate the invite and opportunity to come and present. So hopefully this is going to be a good session today. I'm looking forward to it. I got started on the SharePoint platform, as you mentioned, probably 10 years ago, 11 years ago now on the 2007 platform. So I've kind of grown up and cut my teeth on the SharePoint platform and have used NinText and other workflow tools a lot over the years. So it's kind of fun to speak to the user group today on what it is that we're going to talk about. So today's topic is Office 365 automation using Nintex, Flow, and PowerApps. And where this really came about as far as the idea of giving this presentation is over the last, 6-7 months or so, I've just personally had tons and tons of questions on what to use when it comes to automating a process or building a form out within SharePoint, because we have a lot of options that are out there. And I got a lot of questions, or continue to get a lot of questions on, well, what's the difference between Nintex and Flow and PowerApps, and when do I use one tool versus the other? And I thought, well, you know what, I should just put a little session together on this and walk through it and maybe answer some of those questions. Now, I wanted to give a little bit of a brief introduction on who Nintex is here at the beginning. That way, if for some reason you haven't heard of us, you'll at least have a little bit of understanding who Nintex is. So I'll take just a second to go through that, and we'll then get right into today's presentation. So Nintex has been around for a little bit over 10, 11 years now. We really got started on the 2007 platform with our workflow tool, and it's really grown over the years into the form solution and moving on beyond each of the platforms as they come up. And as we've grown, we're up to almost 500 employees this year, spread all around the world. Our headquarters are up in Seattle, technically Bellevue, but up in Seattle. And we've really had great success with almost 8,000 customers now at this point. And we've gotten a lot of awards. We got a couple of new awards this year down at, I'll address those here a little bit later, when I was at Ignite. I had the opportunity to present a session at Ignite this year in Orlando. And so we had some good awards that we were given down there. Of the 8,000 customers, we have a ton of them that are out there. 30% of most of the Fortune 500 are with us. We're pretty happy about a lot of those clients that work with us every day. And what I wanted to talk about today, I'm going to focus primarily around the Office 365 platform. I bring up this slide because most of you may or may not know this, but we got started within the on-prem realm of SharePoint over here on the left-hand side. And we still reside there today. So once SharePoint 2019 is out and everybody's starting to use it, we're there as well. But once Office 365 came out many years ago, we will also have a presence there within SharePoint Online. And then we also have our workflow engine, which is disconnected from SharePoint. So we had a lot of clients that were interested in using a workflow tool that would sit outside of SharePoint and would give us the flexibility to do some of the things that you can't do within 365. So if you think of like an anonymous form, you can't have that within SharePoint Online. But with the Workflow Cloud, you can have that anonymous form, and it will write the data into your SharePoint list. So that's kind of a key differentiator and where something like the Workflow Cloud comes into play. So that's who we are as a company is concerned as far as NinText is. And I wanted to jump in and I wanted to highlight just a couple Office 365 new features that we've released here recently within the NinText platform. And I'll jump over into a site that I've got here. Whenever you come into our tool, you'll see an introduction here of new features that are out there. So we've added some administration and governance capabilities to be able to control, who are administrators, who can create workflows, a little bit more beyond what the out-of-the-box native SharePoint configuration roles are. Because within the on-prem or 365 platform, you'll look at, do I have full control? Do I have designer access, meaning I can come in and build workflows? So we're going beyond that just a little bit. And we've also added some features here recently around retrieving tasks, comments, and being able to capture those and document them in the SharePoint history list. Also modifying, who the reply address is coming to. Many of you experience that within probably SharePoint Online, that the emails are coming from a kind of a generic address, and a lot of people will get those emails and say, well, who is this that's sending me this email? Like, do I trust it? So being able to control who it comes from can help some of that. And then around our document generation capabilities, we've increased our template limit. So if you imagine automating something like the onboarding of employees, you may have 30, 40 pieces of paperwork that you need to sign off on. And our document generation capability, we've increased that up to 50 to allow that. So really, really excited to be able to see some of those features out there. So I'll flip back over here into our main part of the presentation and get into our discussion today. So this is really what I wanted to cover, was talking a little bit about PowerApps and Flow and NinText. What are each of the tools and some of the differences between them? And today's session is much more around just the thought leadership and education around the different tool sets, so that hopefully you're going to walk away from today's webinar with a little bit of better understanding of each of the tools and when to use them. So PowerApps is what I will start with. We'll then go into Flow and then talk a little bit about NinText down here at the bottom. But PowerApps, most of you probably know, it sits on logic apps with some Azure functions. It's app kind of form centric. Moderate to large as far as that's concerned, and you're going to need a data model here in order to get in and hook this thing up. Where Flow is more of the process side, much more around personal tasks, much more linear focus, kind of going straight down the page, and it's more of that low code to real code type of scenario. And then NinText being more of an enterprise solution with advanced workflow and much more of a low code to even no code type of solution, and we'll get into that today. So PowerApps platform, really there to build custom business applications and mobile applications. So you think about this as the form that I want to fill out, that place where I want to go enter data and kick off a process. Now, it's in the Office 365 plans. If you look at them, it's basically the E1 plan and higher. You'll be able to leverage PowerApps and start using that. And one of the things that I think a lot of folks don't realize is that PowerApps is technically independent of SharePoint. It's not like it is a SharePoint thing. It works with SharePoint, but technically it sits outside of the SharePoint platform, but it integrates with it very well. And typically you're going to run PowerApps from a SharePoint list or library, so that when you go out to fill out a form, you can have it run and write data in there. Also works very good on mobile devices. So if you think about iOS or Android, you probably have one of those two items in your pocket. It will run of those. And also via the web if you happen to be using Dynamics 365. And you'll use PowerApps Studio, which you install on your desktop in order to configure it. And you can download that at that address right there, web.powerapps.com. And it looks like I really wanted to drive home that point with PowerApps Studio on your desktop by putting 2 bullet points in there. So good to see that. So that's where you're going to get PowerApps from. And I found this site out here around some of the configuration items that I wanted to highlight for you. And this is a site on Microsoft's environment that talks about connecting SharePoint from PowerApps and some of the things just to pay attention to that are out there. Known issues and other items that you just want to look at. And so you'll come in and see all of the items that are in here that are supported. And I find this helpful when you're starting to look at different solutions to see what's out here. So you can do multi-line text boxes, choices. Here's some of the default, you can do a view lookup, edit lookup. So really good information over here on what's going on. You can do currency, person, hyperlinks, pictures. Not able to do task outcomes or external data or ratings, but can also leverage the managed metadata. But that's all also in a read-only state as far as bringing that information in. And then down here at the bottom, obviously it doesn't like the spaces, the percentage 20 and that kind of thing that puts into SharePoint. This probably comes around much more of, most of you on this call being SharePoint users are familiar with kind of keeping your URLs clean and not including the spaces in here, but that's some good information to know down there. Also, some of the prerequisites, creating an app, adding it to the SharePoint list, a lot of good information down here if you're interested in using a Power App and kind of getting things started. So I found this page or site very helpful, and I would encourage you to check this out. You'll be able to see this in the recording, but also the deck here itself. I'm supplied the link right here if you want to check it out. I also wanted to talk a little bit about Flow today and a little bit more about this tool. So typically Flow is used to automate a process or automate workflows, as I've put it in here. It's a part of Office 365 and is in most of the plans. There wasn't an easy way to say, hey, it's in the E1 plan and higher. That statement is probably true. But just about all the plans have at least the free offer of Flow within them, and you can go out and check that out and see it. Now, same thing as Power Apps. When I first got started into Flow, when it first came out, I don't think I recognized either that Flow technically sits outside of SharePoint as well, but it integrates with it very well, and you can bring it in and get processes to start. But technically, it does sit outside of there. So you'll be able to go into the what I call the waffle. I guess you call it the app launcher up in the top left, and come down just like you can with Power Apps, and you'll be able to see if you've got Flow out there and be able to open up the tool, launch it, and get started with it. And you'll launch that and use it within the SharePoint lists and libraries in order to build flows out. And I took this screenshot, and I'll navigate to the page here in a second. Here are many of the flows that you can use out in the environment. And the majority of these have much more of a personal kind of touch to them. And you think about the context of when flows are used, they are typically used when an individual wants to get a notification of something, like send myself a reminder 10 minutes before a meeting, or getting the weather update, or getting push notifications. Just a lot of different flows that are out here. You have the availability to kick off, but you'll notice a consistent theme of kind of that personal touch to them of when I want to receive content or information, it's a little bit more about me when you go out and look at the flows. But this is a good site as well as far as the templates that are available. And you can see all the organization of this as far as emails, events and calendar items, mobile, just a lot of notifications and things that Flow will do. So pretty neat to be able to come out and see all of these within the environment here. So that's another great asset if you're looking for some education on the flows that are available to you. Also wanted to cover a little bit around some of the flow plans that are out there. For most of the plans on Office 365, you'll at least have the free version of it. And let me navigate to the site that has this as well, just in case any of it's updated. We're always using the latest information here. So those flows will be free in the majority of those scenarios. You'll see some of the limits around 750 runs per month, unlimited flow creations that are out there. And in the event that your organization needs a little bit more than that, you always have the $5 per user per month cost here, which will bump you up to 4,500 runs per month in the unlimited flow creation as well. And then if you need anything beyond that, you have the $15 per month, which gives you some additional connectors that are out there, a little bit more control around governance, and 15,000 runs per month that you see out here as well. And I think there's an additional plan that is out there that is $40 per user per month that you can leverage as well if the $15 a month plan isn't doing it for you. So some additional things to look at there. But I found this page very helpful with understanding the frequencies, publishing flows, all kinds of good information out here related to that. Also some additional information here on access, management. Really like these comparison charts. And here's the other additional cost one down here that references the $40 per month on some of the plans that you're looking at on features functionality here. So very helpful page within the flow comparison here of the different plans that are out there. And then also there's a similar page as well that I wanted to highlight in here around some of the configuration options that are available. And this is a good one. Some of the request timeout limits, messaging sizes that are out here, some of the retry policies of how many times that will attempt. Also things like run duration. I was a little surprised to see this on the 30-day limit. And a lot of times when I've gotten in conversation with folks, I think they're a little surprised as well. But if you think about it, it's not too surprising. And how big of a platform Office 365 is as far as users are concerned. You would be consuming a lot of resources if you think about the millions of flows that would be running. If they would run beyond kind of a 30-day time frame, it would consume a lot of resources. But something to think about, because if your processes are going to run beyond 30 days, you want to pay attention to this because the flow is going to expire and stop running at that 30-day mark. So if you're doing something like that onboarding example I was talking about at the beginning, you want to make sure to pay close attention to that. Minimum runtime intervals, maximum, the history here on how long the history is retained. 28 days is how long that is going to last. So that one's one that's helpful to me because in a lot of organizations, you want to keep it beyond that. And if there is a requirement, you want to make sure to maybe log that into the SharePoint history list or maybe create another list where you can send some of that history if you need it from a compliance perspective. So good one to pay attention to. A lot of other things that are in here, definition limits, as far as actions within those workflows. Here's another link to some of the SharePoint limits, which most of you are probably familiar with, just out of the box stuff that you may want to contend with. And then all the IP addresses in here in case you need to deal with any of those. But I found this very, very helpful as you're going through your business requirements and starting to select a tool to use to come in here and learn a little bit more about. All right. Also, I created this slide, and myself and some of my colleagues, when we started comparing some of the tools together. And when do I want to select one versus the other one? How do they compare? And this one kind of pointed out to me in a very real way that Microsoft Flow, you can compare it to some of the other personal task type of notifications. So you think about Zapier, if this then that. I think about if this then that when you think about the personal side of it is your home, and I've got a Nest thermostat, I've got another thing that does the garage door, I've got another system that does the lights. You've got all these systems in your house. You can take a tool like if this then that kind of in your personal side and orchestrate them together, so that when my phone is 5 miles from my house, the thermostat changes and the house is going to be warmer and the lights come on and that kind of stuff. So those more personal focused type of platforms, when you think of Zapier, if this then that, that's really what I think Flow compares to as far as what the competition is with the tools that are there, because they are much more personal focused. So a good comparison for that one. And then also, I wanted to jump in a little bit on the NinText side and show a little bit about the NinText tool as well. Some of you may or may not be familiar with the platform and how we use that on a daily basis. So if you're in the on-prem world or in 365, you can navigate to any list or library that's out there. And if you've got the tool installed, you'll be able to access that from the list up here at the top. So you'll see one button for forms, and then you'll see the second button for workflow down here. And then you can click on that and go into the individual form designer or workflow designer and start to build out a form like you see right here and be able to kind of tailor that form and make it look the way you want it. I do like this because it is very tightly integrated with the SharePoint platform. It's simply just an add-on so that you'll see the access point right here with workflow and forms, and you can simply just click on that, open it up, and start to build out your process there. So in this example with the form designer, when I open it up, you'll see all of the controls that are on the left-hand side of the page here in just a second, and you'll be able to kind of drag and drop those controls onto the canvas in order to build out your form. And you're going to get a little bit more ease of control. The thing that I like about this solution, obviously I work for Nintex, but one of the things I like about the solution is the no-code capabilities of it. PowerApps, you have to be a little bit more developer focused to build it out. But with this, a project manager, a business analyst, a non-technical person can come out and build out a form, build out a workflow every day in that drag and drop fashion. So if I wanted to know the geolocation or capture that where I filled out the form, just drag and drop and be able to select on that button. So a lot of controls and very tightly integrated within the SharePoint platform. So if you wanted to look up information from another list, the term store, have those as your drop-down values. Or if you were even on this particular list, you'll see all the items that are over here, and you wanted to create a new column, it's just really tightly integrated. So I could even just click right there and get that light box to come out and create a new column. It's not like I have to exit the designer and go back into the list to create it. We can just do it right here and be able to create those items. And on the workflow side, very similar. Come out to your list, click on the workflow button, and then you'll be brought into the workflow designer like you see right here, and then you can drag and drop and build this out. And I've really enjoyed this platform over something like SharePoint Designer over my tenure on the consulting side of the business for over 10 years, because I really got started out on the project management realm and didn't have a developer background. So it was very nice and easy to come out and be able to not only start to architect more solutions, but also come and build and configure them myself, because there's no code involved. So if you wanted to do something like a state machine, very easy to just open this up, start defining all your states in the list, and as it's built out in the structure here, start to navigate through the items and do whatever it is that we need to do within the workflow. So very, very easy to kind of drag and drop and build out all of that for it. Now, last thing I'll cover in here, I had a lot of requests, or we have had a lot of requests to put together a little bit of a comparison sheet as well between the two platforms. So you'll see several items that we're comparing here. So when you look at Flow, much more task-based, I would say. Again, those personal type of notifications where we're much more workflow-based, like process automation. And I think you'll find that in small things like notifications, or not notifications, but approvals. So if you're going to have multiple levels of approval, I want to go to the manager and get approval, and then go to a vice president, and then the CEO. Those kind of decision trees and ability to have that state machine and move around is a big difference, because a lot of that you can't get done in the Flow platform. So in workflow in NinText you can. So personal versus enterprise, basic versus advanced. And this is probably the biggest bullet point that I would hit home when comparing these two. Is Flow does essentially the basic workflows, and then when you need to get advanced, you're going to need to get another solution, which NinText fills that gap very nicely over here on the advanced side. And also, we can do the basic ones as well when you think about NinText. There's a model once you are on our subscription plan that any workflow that has 5 actions or less is essentially free. So if you think about that, it's very nice to be able to have a lot of those free workflows, and you don't have to worry about user counts, because we don't care how many users, we don't care how many times a workflow runs. All we care about is how many workflows you want to build. So that really works out for the basic and advanced, but you'll definitely need it for the advanced. Also, low code, no code versus kind of real code. So in the Flow, you may need to go out and build some logic apps out there if you're going to get into the really much more advanced stuff, if you need a state machine or something like that. So I'm a big fan of leveraging the no code, low code side of NinText. Baseline features versus robust. A lot of feature comparisons that you can get into here, and I won't go into the weeds too far from that perspective. And then the last thing I wanted to point out here, limited integration basically flows for SharePoint Online. I know a lot of folks on this call probably still have hybrid solutions in place where you've got a SharePoint Online instance, but you still have an on-prem instance running. So in that case, NinText, we're fully integrated, and we can do on-premise and in the cloud. And a lot of times you may have processes that start on-prem, and you want to start a workflow within 365, and we can do that. Or on the flip side, you may have a workflow that starts within 365 and pushes itself down to on-prem, which you can do that as well. And then even operate outside the 365 platform. So again, take that anonymous user, have them make a request, fill out an intake form, and kick off processes, whether they're in SharePoint Online or in the on-prem realm as well. So a lot of good features that we can compare within those. A couple other things that I wanted to highlight as well as far as feature comparisons between them. One of the things that NinText offers is the document generation capability. And I think of myself back in the consulting days, it's probably one of the features that I underutilized a good bit, was the document generation capability. And so basically what it allows you to do is take an Office application like Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and use those as your template. And if you think about the onboarding of an employee and all the paperwork that you have to fill out, you could have all of that paperwork in a Word format and have multiple templates, by the way. And that's what I was referring to at the beginning on the 50. I may have 30, 40 different pages that HR manages. And we can take those 30, 40 Word documents and we can inject information into them. Every single one of those documents probably has my first name, last name, and address on it, and it can go and populate all that stuff automatically, and can either output the original document, or a lot of what our clients choose to do is have the document generation output a PDF, and then leverage a service like DocuSign, Adobe Sign, whatever service you want to leverage to get the signature on all those pages. So that way we can get rid of the paper. You can have that email sent. I know when I was onboarded at NinText, I received an email my first day, and it was one PDF, which was all the onboarding paperwork, and then I used DocuSign to sign it, and I was done from there. So very, very straightforward to be able to generate documents. And it doesn't have to be the onboarding of employees. We're working with healthcare organizations on pre-registration. If you've ever gone in to be admitted to the hospital for a surgery or procedure, you got to do all that pre-admission paperwork. Well, you could do that with an NinText form and have the document generation capabilities to even output that document for you at home and just let you print it out. That way you can just walk in with it. Or if the hospital is taking it to the next level, don't even have to print it out. let that automate and integrate with a system like Epic's at the hospital or whatever ERM they're using in order to integrate all that information and process it. So document generation is a big piece that I enjoy. And then also the analytics capability. And I love this quote. I don't remember who gave this to me, but you can't optimize what you don't measure. And I like this because we have a tool called Hawkeye, which is the analytics tool. And essentially, we have built these pre-built lenses, which are basically Power BI dashboards that have already been pre-built for you. So you don't have to worry about building. The lens is there for you. It's already been built. And that way you can see what you're doing with your workflows in your environment. And you can also direct the workflow or the lens to a particular workflow, and you can see exactly what that individual workflow is doing. So how many times has it ran? If it's expense reimbursement, how often are expenses being paid, meaning the timing, and how long does it take the manager to approve? So all that stuff is really, really helpful. And with those lenses, you can actually export them or download them directly into Power BI, and you can see those reports in Power BI. But the thing that I like about it is the data model, when you download them, is imported into Power BI as well. And then you can start to build out your own dashboards. So you're going to get several like you see on the screen here, and then you can build out a 7th, 8th, 9th dashboard to see the data in the way that you want to see it, because our lens is basically pre-built for you, which is a good starting point. The other thing that I like about it as well is the ability to have these beacons out here, and the beacons essentially allow you to capture data at different places in the workflow. So after each approval, I want to capture how long it took to get there. That's the ending beacon. And then we can run analytics on how long it takes a manager to approve versus a vice president versus a CEO, that kind of thing. So very, very straightforward for that. So a lot of advantages that you get in there. Now, what I wanted to talk about here next, jumping out of kind of the feature comparison for a second, was talking about process automation as a whole. Microsoft has spent a lot of time in the recent year talking about process automation a good bit, which is where a lot of this flow conversation has come. And I've really enjoyed that conversation because it's really kind of put a spotlight on organizations automating processes. And I think it's very healthy, and it's great to have a lot of these processes come up. But most organizations, according to McKinsey, still have a ton of processes that are highly manual, and they haven't been automated yet. And the majority of those processes, furthermore, kind of sit in this middle between simple and complex. They're in this sophisticated realm. They're not quite complex, but they're not quite so simple. So there's a lot of opportunity, I think, for us on this particular meeting, because we probably spend a lot of our time working with organizations inside of your business to automate processes that are out there, or at least document them. And there's just a lot of opportunity for you to be able to add business value. Now, when you go to your toolkit or your toolbox and you need to pull out a different tool, you're going to come and grab at different pieces here. PowerApps is a little bit more on the complex side. You need a little bit more technical resources. So you're probably going to take a dev IT person to create a Power App on this end. Flow's a little bit more on the individual simple processes side, but NinText sits right in that sweet spot in the middle, so that those sophisticated processes, you can go out and automate them, again, in that no-code type of way, so that IT doesn't have to go and automate and build that form or workflow. An individual in the business can be able to do that on their own. I'll give you an example. I live down in Atlanta, and there's a retailer down there that has used this tool, and they've gone from probably having a dozen workflows, and I think in around 18, 20 months, almost 1,600 workflows they have in their environment now. And that's a lot of workflows to automate in such a short period of time, and it's because the business is automating those processes themselves. IT can never scale to that type of throughput of creating workflows. So really, really nice to be able for individuals to be able to go and do that. couple things here why Microsoft customers look at Nintex a good bit. Several things that you can pay attention to in here. I think number one, we're one of the fastest ways that you can go and build an app due to its no-code type of functionality. Very, very flexible. You can put together very advanced workflows, advanced processes using things like a state machine in a very easy way. And it really allows you to kind of go out there and orchestrate those processes. Another thing that I think folks are sometimes surprised about is the lowest cost of ownership. So when you go out and look at some of the plans that I showed you a little earlier, and you look at some of the enterprise availability, on average, we're probably somewhere less than $5 per employee per month, much lower cost than some of the other workflow tools that are out there when you start to aggregate the per workflow per employee cost there. And also one of the highest overall satisfaction ratings as well. And we've gotten several awards that you see over here on the right-hand side of the screen here. So a lot of good things there. So not all processes are created equal, that's for sure. So when you look at this, I think to break it down in simplicity terms, Flow's good at kind of transforming individual productivity tasks. So as an individual, I want to get notifications when X happens, Y happens, then send me a notification or an email or let me know what's going on. Otherwise, if you want to get into much more sophisticated business process, NinText does a great job of that. We've been doing that for years. And I think at the end, one of the things I'd like to summarize with as well is that Microsoft loves NinText too, and I think it's a good message to also communicate. We were Microsoft Office SharePoint Application Partner of the Year, which was something I think we were pretty proud of, because Office 365 and SharePoint is really where we as NinText have grown up, and we're very, very committed to that platform and the success of that platform and the adoption of it. And I love using our tool in the 365 platform because it drives a lot of adoption and usage of it. And my eyes really light up a lot of times when I see folks take a process and automate it within the SharePoint platform, and they may not be SharePoint users that have used the tool a good bit, but they see the success and all of a sudden they become big fans of it. Also, we've got other various awards that we've won. This year at Ignite, we got a couple awards. For NinText, the workflow tool within Office 365 awarded Best Overall App, and the Forms solution within 365 Best Overall Value. So pretty excited to be able to see those things within the platform. All right, so I think what I'm going to do there is hit the pause button. I think we've gone through a decent amount of content here. And I would love to hear if there are any questions, and Danny can help me out with this since I'm not able to see the chat questions that are coming in. So I'm just curious if there are any questions that are out there around PowerApps, Flow, NinText, or even just other general SharePoint stuff that you want to get into, since we're talking to the SharePoint user group. This is the platform I've grown up with and love talking about it.
Sure, Terry. Thanks for the presentation. And we actually did just have a question come through. So that first question is, does NinText integrate with Microsoft Teams?
Yeah, it can. And matter of fact, within our NinText Workflow Cloud tool, we've actually pulled in several connectors leveraging the API to be able to go out and integrate with Teams. And I think the ones that I have in my particular environment, and this is off the cuff here, the ones that I brought into my environment are, I have to remember, like create a channel, post a message, that kind of thing. So with our extensions capability, essentially any platform that you have, if you want to integrate it with another solution, you can do that right here and pull in other things. So Teams is a really good example. Now, my environment, we've only chosen these two. There are a lot of other API calls that we could make, but this is nice because if I want to post a message in a Teams, I can drag this over. And again, this is in Nintex Workflow Cloud. You can simply just click on that action, see what teams are available. So I've got the maintenance team, the project management team. Let's do maintenance team. Now it's going and it's loading what channels I have available for that team. So I've got this residential channel. So I'm going to select that, and then I can choose what my message is going to be. So I could allow the user to fill out a form, maybe requesting a channel, and somebody has to approve it to be made. Or I could leverage the variables, and let's assume that I had an open text field. This is kind of a silly one here, just to store. Let's see, I don't have any good open text ones other than, let me put my name as the channel message. I could just click insert and put it in there. But it's nice to be able to post that message out there and say, hey, Terry Simpson, that would be me, a full name, is a new employee as of today. So that would be the message that would be posted. So in the onboarding of the employee example, we want to post a message to teams as soon as they're officially on board as far as HR is concerned, and that would be posted to teams, and that lets everybody know. So hopefully that wasn't too long-winded of an answer, but the answer is absolutely.
Thank you, Terry. Now the next question we've had come through is, how do we know that Microsoft Flow won't come back with all of the features that Nintex offers?
That is a great question. I ponder that myself sometimes, and I'm always curious of what's going to happen there. So that is true. They could come out with new features tomorrow, but I think the question is more around, what are you doing today? So you're gonna build out a process, you're gonna map out a process, and you're gonna do something. What tool are you gonna use today to do it? So in some of the instances, you're gonna need to use a much more robust tool like NinText, so you can do that today. Now, that's not to say that in the future, Microsoft will continue to enhance Flow, enhance the features that are there. But think about the Nintex platform, and that we've been around for 10 years, very mature platform, that we're going to continue to advance the ball much further and further and further and keep raising the bar. Flow just hasn't caught up yet. Now, the other thing to think about, and this is much more of my personal opinion, and I'm speaking to the user group here in that context as a SharePoint person, if you think about it, Logic Apps sits on top of Azure, and Flow sits on top of Logic Apps. If you need to build something much more advanced as far as a process is concerned, I'm sure that Microsoft would love for you to go the Logic Apps route to build out that advanced functionality, because at the end of the day, that Logic app is going to encourage more consumption of Azure, which is going to encourage more consumption of revenue, or more revenue that generates off of Azure. So it's one of those ways for you to go out and get a flow started and kind of whet the appetite a little bit on getting something started. But as soon as you need to go beyond that, then you're going to need to build out a Logic Apps and get in and start to consume some additional services there. So there's also a revenue generating model, and you kind of see that with the different plans, because as soon as you need to do more advanced things, I need to go to a plan 1 or a plan 2 or the $40 plan in those aspects. But it's definitely a potential thing. Microsoft could definitely come out with a lot more features and make them available in the free version, and that could happen for sure. So hopefully that's a good answer for you. That's probably more my personal opinion than anything, but good question though.
Thank you, Terry. The next question we have is, what logging mechanism do we have with Nintex if we have a few hundreds of actions from different workflows? Is it easy to keep track and monitor all of them?
Yeah, so we have some logging actions out there to log to the SharePoint history list. So I'm a big fan of that within SharePoint Online, especially when you're getting into a more complex workflow and you need to go in and do some testing. I use the log to history action a good bit, so that as I'm progressing through the workflow, I'm documenting that within the SharePoint history list so that I see right where I'm at. I also enjoy doing that because I have a little bit of a compliance background. From a compliance perspective, I love it for an audit trail. So that you see the history of what's happening. Because a lot of times in a workflow, the process changes, and values change, and responses change, and you can document all that history. So I think that's the context in which the question was asked, but that log to history action is probably the biggest one. Now, we can also make SQL requests, to post messages. We've got the web request as well. So if you think about NinText, it's a tool that can sit in the middle of all your applications and can interact with all of them. So if I need to go to Dynamics and log something, based upon a response, maybe it's a help desk ticket or something, or a customer that I'm documenting information on, you can go there and log that information. So whatever system you want to communicate with, we can communicate with those systems and send information back and forth. That last part was probably a little bit more of a broad answer, but hopefully a good one for you.
Okay, the next question is about logging and Nintex action on-premise. It incurred some performance limitations. What about cloud where we don't control Nintex databases, etc.?
Yeah, that's a good one. That's a really, really good one, because that is somewhat of a black box when you think about SharePoint Online, and being able to increase or decrease the horsepower, if I could use that term, in those platforms. But I've experienced good response time from not only Office 365, but I think Nintex use within 365, and the responsiveness that's in there. What should be happening as your environment gets more content and gets busier, it should respond well. I've had one, maybe two cases where responsiveness was slow. I've always encouraged folks to reach out to us at Nintex and let us know through our support line, but also let Microsoft know, because a lot of times if you're seeing some lagging of responsiveness, maybe things are a little slow, reach out to Microsoft as well, and sometimes things pick up. I don't know if Microsoft would officially come out and say, yeah, we threw more resources at it, or we threw another server into that tenant, or there may be something going on there that they're able to kind of fix on the back end. A lot of times you may not hear what the resolution was, but so a lot of times you'll see it, as far as your experience is concerned, that it resolved itself. But you can definitely have some options there. It's one of those things where, in an on-prem environment, it's like owning your own house. You own it. You can do whatever you want. If I want to put a generator out back to give me more power, I can do that. But I'm responsible for all that. Whereas versus if I'm in SharePoint Online, and I'm renting a house, I'll put it in that context. I don't have the ability to just go install a generator and throw more horsepower at it, because I don't own the place. I can't do that. I've got to kind of live in the box that I'm in. But sometimes you call up the landlord and make a request like that, and they'll help you out. So that's kind of the way that I look at it.
Thank you, Terry. That's all the questions we've had come through so far. I'm going to give everybody a couple more moments, though, to get any last-minute questions in, as I don't want to cut anyone off.
Very good. It looks like we're doing great on the time, so we just got a couple minutes left.
Yes, exactly.
And I think, too, as we're waiting on a couple of questions to come in there, Danny, as well, if any other come up after today's conversation, I would encourage folks to reach out to Danny or myself directly if you wanted to, and Danny can probably filter them on to me as well. If you have any other questions about my thoughts on Flow and PowerApps and Nintex, I really enjoy doing these type of sessions, primarily just from an education, thought leadership perspective of comparing the platforms and what's included, not included, and just all in that spirit of thought leadership.
Okay, Terry, as there are no more questions, this will conclude today's webinar. A recording of this will be sent to all participants. In the meantime, if you have any questions, please do contact us at info@microexcel.com. As Terry mentioned, if you guys think of any questions after today's call, we can definitely connect you with Terry for those answers as well. So I want to thank all of you for attending and have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Danny.
Thank you.